the legislation you're proposing would create a list of people who responded they were non-citizens, correct?
Correct.
Okay, to the jury summons.
Correct.
Would it be fair to say that when people get jury summons, there's not a certain timeline of how often they get it? Like you can get 2 in a year, or you could not get 1 inside of 5 years.
I'm not advised.
Is that possible? Is it within the realm of possibility?
I'm not advised.
Okay. In your personal experience, have you ever experienced that? Have you ever gotten jury summons?
I have.
Okay. Do you know how long it was between your jury summons?
Maybe a decade.
A decade? Mm-hmm. Okay. Are you aware that people can change their citizenship status?
Absolutely.
Okay. In fact, almost 100,000 Texans became citizens in 2019 alone. Were you aware of that?
I believe that is correct.
Okay. And so, does this legislation create a process to check to see if people have become citizens within the last year?
Mr. Wu, we have not changed any of the list maintenance protocols that are already in play, and that is part of the process.
Does this legislation create any type of process to remove the names of people who have become citizens?
Mr. Wu, existing law that we are not dealing with before us today does that. All we're doing is adding to the notification list. We're not changing the protocol.
So I'm going to take by your answer twice now, and the legislation itself, that it does not have a process to take the names off this list. Okay. So it's really
not
easy.
In this bill, it's already in
so
other
this bill is going to check every
touching.
time and create a list. And if someone becomes a citizen, is it the intent of this legislation for them to have to get their name off this list before they can register the vote?
The bill does not provide for that.
So if someone becomes a citizen in between the time they were sent a jury summons card and they returned it saying they were not a citizen yet, and they became a citizen then the following year, do they have to take their name off the list manually?
Mr. Wu, we are not changing
really simple
the protocol. They investigate this first before anybody would be referred for prosecution. We're not changing that process. The protocols are...
That's not the question. The question isn't, we're not to the prosecution yet. We're just talking about whether somebody can register to vote legally. If someone is already on this list because they returned a jury summons card and they have become a citizen, 100,000 Texans potentially have become citizens in the last year, they want to register to vote, do they have to manually take their name off this list before they can register?
Mr. Wu, I'm not advised.
Is this your legislation? How are you not advised?
We are not changing the protocols for list maintenance. All we're doing is adding the Attorney General to the notification list.
Representative Klick, you are creating a possible criminal prosecution, and you cannot tell the average Texan whether or not they will be prosecuted for doing what they feel is their constitutionally protected right. You're creating legislation, creating a law that subjects someone to possible criminal prosecution, and you are leaving it vague enough where they don't know how to act.
Mr. Wu, all we are doing is adding the Attorney General to the list that gets notified. Those notifications are quarterly.
So let me ask you then, if the Attorney General gets a list, they have a list that said someone turned in a card that says that they are not a citizen for the purposes of jury service, but they have become a citizen within the last year. Is that person now subject to criminal prosecution?
There's generally an investigation before somebody's charged with a crime.
I'm not in the AG's office. I don't do any investigations. Is that person subject to prosecution under your law?
If they are not a citizen, they could be.
And if they are, they're now conflicting. They now have a conflict in the law.
There's a means to prove that.
I'm sorry?
There is a means to prove that they have passed and become a citizen.
Let me be sure. In order for these people, these 100,000 Texans who become citizens every year, they would have to have a separate approval, a separate showing of evidence before they're allowed to properly exercise their vote. Otherwise, they're under threat of criminal prosecution.
Mr. Wu, how many of those 100,000 folks that you spoke of that have become new citizens have declined to do jury service and self-identified as non-citizens?
I'm sorry, I can't hear anything.
How many of those new citizens you're speaking about have been called up for jury service and have self-identified as non-citizens?
I don't know. I mean, I would assume 100,000 of them a year would say they were not a citizen before the beginning of the year, and they became a citizen during the year. 100,000 Texans every single year.